I'm Haley Taylor, and you're listening to the Rough Draft Diaries. This week on the Rough Draft Diaries, we're going behind the scenes of Tiff. That's the Toledo International Film Festival.
I'm Brittany Burns, and I'm a project assistant helping out with social media, sponsorships, and anything else that needs to get done.
And I'm Sarah Allen, and I'm, I guess, the chair of the Tiff Planning Committee, but really I'm just the taskmaster.
Tiff is the Toledo International Film Festival. It's an annual event that celebrates cultural diversity through films, programming, and food.
There are no other events like this. I mean, the library has a great film festival, but in Toledo proper, I think to see some of these international and independent films, you have to go up to Ann Arbor or Detroit. And so, we wanted to have that experience here, so we created it.
And that was 4 years ago. And although the TIFF has changed slightly throughout the years, the core of this festival is truly the international films that they bring to the public over the course of one weekend.
And I think that's one of the things that makes the TIFF really cool, is because the films that we're showing are from all around the world, so they're by definition international. They're not of this place. But then the food comes from local restaurants. The performances come from local groups. And so it's I just think it's really cool the way that you are able to use international films to really create this cool sense of place here in Toledo.
And I mean, the TIFF that's what it's about, is celebrating our local immigrant heritage and our diversity. That's one of the main drivers behind the TIFF. So I think that's a good point in the marrying of those two things.
Brittany and Sarah are calm, cool, and collected when talking about their passion for the TIFF. But when they talk about organizing the event and all the work behind the scenes, things become a bit more animated. It seems like it's controlled chaos. Even getting the rights to air some of these films becomes an adventure.
Funny story. This year, we actually had an interesting thing happen where the Middle Eastern film that we were planning on showing, there was an issue that we weren't going to be able to screen it. And so we were kind of scrambling to find a replacement. And so I ended up, through a series of entirely legal maneuvers, I ended up WhatsApping the producer in the UAE while she was on maternity leave to be like, hey, we want to screen your film. Can you please tell us how to get the rights? And I felt kind of bad, but at the same time, it was just like, we need this. So all that to say, sometimes it's very straightforward. You send an email, you make a phone call, but because they're international films, often it is a little bit harder to sort of sort back and figure out who is in charge for the international screening rights for this, and then how do I get in touch with them. So everyone come see the Solitaire on Sunday at 3, because I worked really hard for that.
So hard for it. That's perfect.
Showing your favorite movie, even to a friend, can be nerve-wracking. But supporting a film as it's premiering at a festival, well, that's a bit different. Sarah mentioned an instance where the audience didn't react too kindly to a Hungarian film they aired a few years ago. But that doesn't mean the TIFF shies away from sharing challenging films. If anything, they're excited for the opportunity they bring.
Yeah, I mean, we don't steer away from films that could be controversial. That's not helpful. I mean, we want to spark dialogue. We don't want to just show a film that everyone's like, okay, great, bye. I mean, we want people to talk afterwards. So it's okay if people don't enjoy the films. I mean, that's just how it is, right? Like, you don't love every film that you see or every book that you read or every TV show that you binge watch. I mean, we're not trying to spark controversy, but we're not steering away from it either. And we also, for films that we think need additional unpacking, we try and have some conversation around that. We don't just leave it there and wash our hands of it and walk away. Okay, and here's a performance. do. I mean, that's not. So we do try and have either Q&As or some sort of panel discussion with the films that are a little bit heavier.
But not all the films shown at the TIFF are serious dramas. Some of them are lighthearted comedies, and some of them have a bit of romance in them as well. But Sarah and Brittany are not trying to curate your reaction to these films. Instead, they're just hoping that you take interest in the location and the people, the environment of the film, but also the environment of the people in your own backyard.
obviously, like many people, food is always at the foremost of my mind. And so I think of the TIFF as being, in itself, just sort of an appetizer for people. And I think ideally we'd want people to go away from the TIFF and just say, that film from Kosovo was really interesting. I think I'd like to know more about Kosovo, or, some other country that maybe they haven't really thought that much about before. Or, we saw that film from El Salvador. I think that woman down the street is from El Salvador. Like, I wonder if she's seen that film or if she knows anything about what we saw in that film. So just sort of, using that as just a launch point to get more interested and more informed about things.
I'm Haley Taylor, and thanks for listening to this episode of the Rough Draft Diaries.